Hi, good morning, everyone. This is Nicole Testa Boston. I'm the Deputy Director here at FIATech, and I just want to thank all of you for joining us for our Technology Tuesday webinar series, where we'll be discussing the COBie efforts. Before we go ahead and get started, I wanted to just do a brief housekeeping and let you know that we will be recording both the audio and the visuals for this webinar. We will be posting them on our fiatech.org website later this week. It'll take a few days, so check back Thursday or Friday of this week, and we should have the recording up for you all. I also wanted to point out that that toolbar with the GoToMeeting is unique to you. You can minimize that by pushing the orange arrow at any time and having it move off of your screen. And you'll also have noticed that your audio is muted for this call. That's due to the large number of attendees. So we do ask and we encourage questions and comments. You can do so by typing into the questions tab on that toolbar. Those will go directly to me, and as time permits throughout the hour, I will be moderating the Q&A to Rich and John, who will be presenting for us today. If we do run out of time and we don't get a chance to get to your questions, we'll be following up with you following the webinar. So with that, I want to thank both Rich and John for taking the hour and sharing with us their story. Rich Mitrenga is the AEC Business Development Manager for Autodesk. He's responsible for advancing building information modeling to building owners. In this position, Rich promotes the role of BIM in the building lifecycle for operations and maintenance, facilities management, GIS, and building control applications. Rich has been at Autodesk for 14 years and has held various sales and technical positions. He has 30 years of industry experience in facilities management, operations maintenance, BIM, CAD, and GIS applications, and has been involved in consulting, implementing, and customization of these applications, as well as integration with various systems and enterprise applications. Prior to Autodesk, Rich worked for a software reseller as Vice President, managing all sales, support, and consulting services. Joining Rich is John Sullivan. He's a Business Development Manager at Autodesk and works on technology, policy, and standards development with the U.S. federal government agencies and industry partners. John has been with Autodesk for over 17 years in a variety of positions, developing strategic sales and consulting solutions for city, county, federal, and commercial clients. Mr. Sullivan is currently focused on the application of BIM technologies for federal government programs through a project testbed approach of these implementations. Mr. Sullivan is a 25-year veteran in the engineering computer graphic design business with experience as a trainer, technical manager, GIS project manager, and as a strategic account executive. Successful projects include a national facilities management solution for the U.S. Postal Service, an occupancy management and planning tool for America Online, and spatial BIM concept design standards at the GSA. Current projects include working with the U.S. Army and the Corps of Engineers on BIM managers workshops and investigating BIM to facilities management prototype projects. He has a bachelor's degree in physical geography from the University of Maryland and a master's degree in technology management from the University of Maryland. So with that, thank you very much, gentlemen, and let's get started.
Okay, great. Thank you, Nicole. This is John Sullivan. I think I need to shorten my bio, but I'm out of Washington, D.C. with Autodesk, and I'm with Rich Mitrenga today, and we're going to talk about COBie. The way we'll break this apart is that I'll do the first half, sort of setting up most of the concepts, and then Rich will dive into the details. So with that, Rich, if you want to just advance to the next slide. So just starting, I want to just get a level set so that we're all on sort of the same page for this presentation. We want to start with what is COBie, Constructions Operation Building Information Exchange. And I think it could be described best as a process framework for collecting building lifecycle information. It requires omni-class, and COBie can be one of the things, and one of the things we want to talk about today is that it can be used with building information modeling, but also could be independent of building information modeling. It's intended to allow repair and maintenance and renovation task data to be electronically exchanged, and it's an internationally recognized standard, and it just helps the communication between design and construction teams and the building owners, because it creates a standard that allows for sort of known data fields to be passed throughout the life cycle of a building. Okay, so that's the start with COBie. Next slide. Now, also today we're going to talk about Autodesk's Revit COBie Toolkit. So this is a template and some tools that help facilitate collecting the COBie data and passing the COBie data downstream. So it starts with, within Revit, it starts with the facility information and the contact information, which are two pieces of data that COBie asks for. And if we go to the next. But it also includes the spatial information within the BIM model, the floor information, spaces, and zones, which are required COBie data, as well as the building components, MEP equipment. So COBie has many different pieces of data, and we're going to show how the design team can use Revit to populate these sections right now. And then also to do a little bit more level setting, and this might be redundant for many on the call, but just to make sure, I want to talk about building information modeling as a process, and it's a way to provide coordinated and consistent information. It's sort of a way to simulate or predict the building's behavior. I think a classical application of the process is clash detection, to make sure that all of the designed objects are occupying space just on their own and not in the way of something else, as one example. But it's an integrated process in order to understand how the building goes together before it's constructed. So that's, I think a quick definition of what building information modeling is. And the next slide will slice it from a slightly different angle, which is what is the building information model. So of course the model participates in the modeling process, but in the model are things that we expect: doors, windows, walls, rooms, and equipment, three-dimensional objects that allow us to graphically understand the design, but also have other properties. And these other properties are attributes, I say non-graphic properties, but different pieces of data that we can append to the graphical elements just to make them more informative. And this is where we link in the COBie exchange standard with part of the BIM modeling softwares, that we've got lists of attributes and properties that are conformant with what COBie is asking for. But the model also has another aspect, which is the relationship to the other elements, or the parametrics or the behavior of the objects in the BIM model, how the floor relates to the walls, how the doors relate to the walls, and this whole behavior of this model is a building information model. So slicing BIM from two different angles, one as an integrated process and one as a 3D data file, I guess, is probably all we need to say about building information modeling, just to get everybody on the same page. So next slide, please. Okay, so then, and this is a schematic, and Rich, if you want, you could roll this out for the most part, but this is sort of a schematic of conceptual workflows, and there's definitely variation probably on every single project, a bid build project or design build, and sometimes if the teams are well coordinated and integrated, the design model will pass fairly smoothly to the construction model, but often not. But if we start on the left, we've got the design model, the design BIM models, and the construction BIM models. And these are going to meet at sort of this schematic conceptual point of an owner's model view. And this owner's model will have information, if we're doing things the way that we want them to work, it's going to have the COBie information from the design team. It's going to have the COBie information from the construction team. And Rich will show how this happens in particular, but they sort of meet at this owner's model. So we have the graphics, we have the attribute information, we have COBie information, and then we have it in a way that's usable, that's searchable, and able to participate in other types of systems, such as a facilities management system or maintenance management or energy management or document management. So this whole idea of COBie is that we want the data to be transportable to the place that it is most useful, and to be able to do this in an easy and effective and efficient kind of way. Okay, next slide. You got the next slide coming up, right, Rich?
I do. Should
well, the next slide, if we oh, weird, I don't see it. Okay, so, and hopefully I've got the next slide right, but one of the things that we're trying to avoid is data that isn't really useful. And I think the best, maybe an example of this would be handover information, one that comes over as hard copy, which is useful to a certain extent, but we think COBie is a much more portable and effective way of doing that. But even if it's electronic, it may come over as a series of PDFs which aren't quite as useful. Here it is. Or, for instance, we've seen one project where all the hard copy documentation was scanned into one gigantic PDF, and it met all the requirements of electronic submission or electronic transmittal, but was fairly problematic to use. So this lack of consistent and useful deliverables, for owners and operation maintenance is a real issue, and it's one that COBie is well framed to address, and it's very helpful with that part of the design, construction handover process. So next slide, Rich. And I think that's, these are taking a little while to come up, but I think that's about all for me. Do I have another slide, Rich?
Yeah, John, you've got the slide regarding the graphic and attribute data collection, creation and editing.
Oh, that's right. Okay. So I don't know. I must have a slow connection on my side, but the slide is to talk about one of the challenges of working through the workflow of this process is that early in the stage, in the design stage of the process, the information is, for the most part, graphically oriented. Understanding the design is a very spatial kind of process, and the attributes on that information, while there might be some of the specifications or the specific information about those objects aren't known yet. They've been designed conceptually, but they haven't been installed, so some of this information is not really known. But as we move to the contractor, that mix changes. So we see that the attribute information during construction plays a more predominant role, and then on to the owner and operator, the graphical information is much less significant. If we have a tenant changing a space, well, if we have someone moving in and out of a room, it may be an easily described database attribute change and not really have any graphical implications. So one of the challenges of working in this life cycle is that the mix of the graphic to attribute information is sort of in flux. And COBie helps harness this because it participates in all the stages. It captures as much information as possible in the design phase, passing it to the contractor, and then ultimately to the owner-operator as a series of attribute information. So this is a challenge, but it's a challenge that COBie helps with quite a lot. Okay, next slide. Looks like my connection is pretty slow. And the next slide is as soon as I see it, but and Rich, tell me if I'm not getting it right, but is that this COBie process, we're demonstrating a Revit utility for the COBie process today, but that doesn't mean that a BIM is required in order to populate. No, I did get the slide wrong. Okay, so let me jump back to this one. Is that COBie incorporates all these different efforts of different folks within the federal government, NIST, GSA, the Army Corps of Engineers are all working in similar directions, and COBie helps incorporate all of these. Okay, next slide, Rich, and hopefully I get this one right. But the last slide that I have is that the BIM can be used to populate COBie information, but it doesn't have to be. COBie deliverable essentially is a spreadsheet, so the information can be typed into the COBie spreadsheet, but we really feel strongly that using building information modeling with COBie, one, allows the process to be built in rather than added on. Two, it helps, I think, with the quality because of that orientation. It's throughout the process you're adding information. And three, it helps apply some quality assurance standards because you're sort of funneling it through the design process rather than just typing it into the spreadsheet. So it can be done manually, but this process of using a Revit utility with COBie, I think, greatly facilitates the process. And I think that's it for me. Rich, turn it over to you to give us a more detailed explanation of COBie and show us how it works.
Thanks, John. So as we go through COBie, what I'd like to do is to just help you understand the structure of the spread, and I'm going to do it in the context of the spreadsheet, but understand that the COBie is really, it's structured as a series of worksheets in a workbook, spreadsheets within a larger spreadsheet. You could look at it as tables within a database. It's really the understanding of the hierarchy and the context of the information in this in the way the data is structured. So what I'd like to do is use a sort of a graphical view to help understand the hierarchy of the information that we're going to be working with. So if you look at a COBie spreadsheet, one of the first tabs that you will see is the Facilities tab. And to understand the flow of the data, we can begin to look at the facilities being composed of a series of floors or stories, which contain spaces, which then can be grouped into something what we refer to as zones or groupings of the space itself. In addition, those facilities are served by a series of equipment types and then actual instances of that equipment. And then that equipment can be grouped into logical systems. So again, that's the basic spatial and equipment hierarchy of the model itself. In addition to that, there's some information that's also added to the COBie spreadsheet, which defines job sequences and job steps by describing the steps in a particular job, the resources required to do a particular task or job, and what spare parts or equipment might be required as part of that job sequence. In addition, we'll find a number of what I'll refer to as common, basically common tabs, which refer to things like who the contacts are. So that's analogous to the spread to a contact list in Outlook. Other things which specify the documents that are attached, any issues that have come up, simple coordinate geometry, additional attributes, connection, just various information about any one of these levels of information. So if we look at this structure, we can see that moving from left to right, we're kind of moving from the COBie sheets 1 through 8, and then looking at 9 through 16, which is the supplemental information. And typically what you'll find is that that information is built out in this process of left to right. Again, generally the creation, I mean, data is going to be added through various aspects of the project itself, but in terms of understanding where some of this might be created, it generally flows from left to right. The next part that we really want to talk about, or the area that we're going to focus on, are the 7 sheets that we see here, which are typically the ones that are created and maintained in the Revit model or in the building information model. So again, this is not to be an all-encompassing everything about COBie, but really understanding how the COBie model, data model, fits and applies to the Revit model. So before we kind of move on, just want to go over a few things about the COBie spreadsheet so that everyone understands when they're looking at this, what do the colors mean, what's going on. So typically, again, you're going to have one worksheet for every information type, so the spaces are going to be on their own sheet, floors or stories are going to be on their own, equipment types will be on a separate sheet. They're color-coded, and where possible, there have been a number of pick lists that have been provided to facilitate data entry. We can add documents to any of this as a reference to external files, and there's a level of customization that we can also apply to the COBie spreadsheet. So if you look at a standard COBie spreadsheet, first thing you'll see is that there are typically going to be 1 of 5 colors for the columns. And anything that is in yellow is a required field that would typically be entered on that sheet. Anything in orange is a required foreign key, and what that means is that that value would have typically been defined on most likely a previous sheet. For example, if we're looking at the space tab in the spreadsheet, you'll see that level 1 is a floor, and so you'll see it's orange, which means that I would have had to have defined the floor, the story that space is on before I could have created the space. So basically, it's just saying that that information is going to reside on another tab. Anything in purple is typically going to be populated by the authoring software, so it describes what the application is that did that. So in this case, it's Revit, the type of object it is, any external IDs. And also, you'll see green, which means it's required only if specified by the owner. And there are also some, on some of the sheets, you'll see some gray or white columns, which again are regional or owner specified. So they would only be used if required. The other sort of commonality across all these sheets is that every spreadsheet will have these 5 columns, which is created by, created on, external, the system created, all that information. And typically what we're going to do, as you see through this process, we're going to help populate that information. So it's not something you're going to have to do manually. And again, being common to all the sheets, one of the things that you'll find that's really interesting when you begin to look at the sheet is that if I eliminate those from the view, you'll see that I'm looking at the spreadsheet, it begins to look a little bit more like something we would be accustomed to looking at, right? So if I remove the created on, created by, and the external, it's a standard sort of space definition, the name of the space or the space number, the category, classification, the floor that it's on, a description, secondary room tag, we can add usable height, gross area, net area. So again, it's a fairly simple definition to look at that sometimes can get a little overwhelming when you see all the other tabs there. And the other thing that I'll mention is, as we're looking at this, you'll notice that for most of the tabs, you'll also see that there are going to be fields that will be managed and typically required by the authoring software. So in the case of Revit, for a space, you will always have a room number, you will always have a level that it's on, typically going to enter a description, and the usable height and gross area are calculated fields. So those will be populated for you. So if you look at this, really the only information in this sort of core portion of the space tab for COBie, the only thing we'd need to do is fill in the category, the room tag, and the net area if it's required. So again, a lot of that information is going to be populated for you. There are a number of pick lists. So the last tab, so in effect there's 17 tabs, and the last tab shows us a series of pick lists. And those pick lists have the values that would be used, for example, in space classification or a document type for documents, different data such as that. So how do we get from the Revit model to the COBie output? In this case, we'll be working with the spreadsheet. So let's try to put all this together and map some of this. So again, I'm going to make an assumption here in the case of this presentation that there's a familiarity with Revit and the building information model. So I'm going to try to deal with it in that perspective, but I think there's going to be there are analogies to other applications in this as well. So the first thing that we have when we look at this, as we look at the COBie spreadsheet, is we have the Facility tab. And the Facility tab is directly related to the Project Information tab. So it's going to describe typically the characteristics of the project, the building, or the model itself. So it's going to be things like the name of the project, the site name, what units are we using, a description, address of the site, those kinds of things. And so the data that you're typically going to populate from that will come directly from that project information parameter. And in the COBie spreadsheet, there will typically be only one record on that tab. The next tab that, as we begin to move across, is the Floor tab, and this refers to floors or stories of a building, and it is typically directly related to the Revit levels. So you'll typically have an entry in this sheet for each level in the model. And so that level is now, again, going to be analogous to the story or the floor that a particular object or space is going to be on. It's described by simply describing the name, the category, or the type of level or floor that it is, the description, elevation, and height. And again, a lot of that information is going to come directly from the Revit model. And then as we continue moving to the left, the next is the next spatial component is the Space tab, which is directly related to a Revit room or a Revit MEP space, depending on how you're doing that. And again, there will typically be a series of spaces on each of the floors that we define. So as we look at this, we have a facility. Within that facility, we have a series of floors, and on each of those floors, we will have a number of spaces. So now we're into the process of classifying those spaces. We have, again, name, category, simple information that, again, is required for the COBie spreadsheet. Now, the last tab in that spatial structure is a zone, and what a zone is a way of logically grouping a series of these spaces. So in this case, I have an occupancy zone by defining 4 or 5 spaces in either a comma delimited or a list within that spreadsheet to provide a definition of how I might group some spaces. So I may have something like this occupancy zone, or it could be an evacuation zone. Maybe in the facilities management world, you might think about it as a department. So these 5 spaces make up the marketing department. So you can use that to, again, logically group a series of spaces to create something that would be a zone instead of creating, say, an area polygon for that. Now, the next aspect of this is we're now beginning to move into the equipment. So in this little example here, we have a mechanical system, a series of mechanical equipment. And the first tab that we're going to look at is what we would call the Type tab, which, again, directly relates to a Revit family type. So if you think about this, this is the object that you would buy. So it describes the characteristics of all of those instances of the objects themselves, right? So it's something, for example, same manufacturer, model number, warranty duration. They're going to be common across all instances of that. The next part of this then is to begin to look at the COBie structure around the components. So the next tab is the Component tab, which now describes the physical instances or placement of each of those devices and or pieces of equipment. And what that's going to describe is the information that is going to be unique to any given instance. So another way of thinking about types versus components is, if you think about this in the world of AutoCAD, think about it as a block being the type and the instance of that block being the component. In Revit, it's the family type versus the instance. So again, what you're going to have is typically going to have a number of values for each, a number of component records for each equipment type. So that's basically what that's describing. And in the same way that we're able to group a series of spaces into logical systems, we can also do the same with equipment to create these systems. And again, this can be physical connection of sorts. It can also apply to the idea that I might have a number of components that I may maintain at the same time. So a series of doors could be put into a system. So it's not necessarily limited to the traditional, if we think about it from the Revit perspective, of the traditional mechanical or electrical systems. We can have systems that comprise any grouping of the components that are on the previous tab. So in that case, that sort of begins to build out the structure and the parts that are directly related to Revit. Again, I mentioned that there's some customization. These are basically the rules around the customization themselves, and they're described in a lot of the COBie documentation, basically saying things like headings may not be changed, green pick lists may be updated based on local language requirements, classification schemes may be substituted for pick lists. For example, in the U.S., we tend to use OmniClass. In Europe, haven't fully adopted that, so they have their own standards that they're going to choose to use. You may add columns, say, to the space table. An owner may choose to add things like finishes, occupancy, and we can also add custom attributes that can be applied into the attributes table as well. The thing is, as John mentioned, to understand is COBie describes in the core structure of the spreadsheet a series of attributes that will typically be common to all instances or all versions of any given object or space. So, for example, everything you're going to track will typically have a model number, a manufacturer, a serial number, maybe a barcode number. But a door may have, you may need to also collect fire rating, or you may want horsepower on a motor, or you may want a body material for a valve, or information about an air handler, so you might be looking at the air filter type. These attributes are not necessarily specified, or are not specified in the COBie spreadsheet itself, but something that in working with the owner and the folks that are asking for this information, it has to be decided up front. In other words, you can't make the assumption that we know what is or is not going to be expected beyond those core fields. So really requires a very intentional conversation with all the parties involved so that everyone understands what it is that is being asked for when someone asks for the COBie file. I mean, I've heard and have worked with some customers and some companies that have said in their specifications something not much more detailed than I would like a COBie file that I can use to populate my O&M system. And that has two different meanings. So for the person that is collecting the information, they're looking at the spreadsheet, at the column saying, okay, this is the information I'm expecting. The owner now is expecting the information that you might be seeing on the screen here. So again, you need to make sure that everyone is on the same page in terms of what information you want. Now, in the context of this presentation and in the interest of time, there are another series of tabs in that spreadsheet that, for the sake of time, I really am not going to be able to get into a lot of detail on. They don't necessarily, with the exception of the attribute table, do not necessarily really originate or not stored in the building information model per se. And those are the assembly. And so I could just quickly describe those is that we have assembly spare. So again, those are part of the job sequencing, the resources required, documents that might be there, connections, coordinates, and any safety issues that might come along. So there again are sheets to describe those in a series of fields. And if you have any questions on those and it's something I can help answer, by all means, please let me know, and we'll post our email address here in a bit, and feel free to send John or myself an email. We'll try to answer that for you. So what I'd like to do now is to briefly go over, for those that are using Revit, like to go over the Revit COBie Toolkit to describe what's there, and then I'll quickly demonstrate how that toolkit works that we're providing. So as John mentioned, there's a series of utilities and tools that we provide in order to help you populate and create the data required for COBie. So if we look at the general structure here, we have the project data, the spatial data, and the building component information. So we're able to store and document the project information, the facility information in the project parameter. We can also add a contact record there if need be. It could be the person who's responsible for that model. We also have the utilities to store and ability to collect the floor information or story information or levels, the spaces or rooms, create the zones, as well as managing the types, the components, and I realize that system is missing off that list. So again, being able to relate that and begin to gather and collect some of that information. So when you download the toolkit, and I'll put the address up here at the end of the presentation, there are a series of 6 components within that toolkit. And the first is a Revit template, which provides the really COBie formatted schedules, schedule keys, library files already populated that come with the model, as well as a means to be able to export that information. You also get a blank project, which again is essentially the same as a template, except it, rather than being stored as a Revit template, it's stored as a project file. And this is a little more useful in being able to use to populate an existing Revit project that you may have started prior to implementing the COBie toolkit. And basically it allows us a means to be able to transfer schedules and other information. We have a couple of families to support the zones and systems which are typically not associated with Revit model objects. Now I mentioned that in Revit we do have mechanical systems, electrical systems, and we could support those, but things like occupancy zones and sort of the more simple definition of a, for example, a system of doors, Revit really doesn't have a way to create that system, at least not currently. So what we're doing is we're providing a series of families that can be placed on the site level that will support the definition of that information. We also have a blank formatted, a blank spreadsheet, the COBie spreadsheet that you can use to populate the data into. We also provide another spreadsheet, which is a window and door reformatter. One of the requirements of a COBie spreadsheet or the COBie deliverable is that for doors and windows, which typically have a to and from room, we need to be able to create that a field value that has a comma delimited list of from room and to room, and something that Revit again doesn't support directly. But basically what we could do is we could export the schedule, run it through this little tool, and be able to then populate the COBie spreadsheet with it. And the last component is a macro utility or an add-in to Revit to help us update the components in a model with information that's going to be repeated. I mentioned early in the presentation with things like created by and created on. Rather than having to manually enter that on each record, it's a utility that will allow you to populate a COBie field that's created by the template with a value that you choose to describe who's created it, the date it was created, and a few other things that we can do. So again, that's created provided as part of the utility installs as an added to Revit. So if we look again at what the COBie enabled project is, so if I create a project with the template, what you'll find is that we have a series of schedules that will fill in, that will come into the model, as well as a schedule key which has all the room and space categories that can also be used to apply to the spaces. So, and the reason that we're providing only the space classification is that Revit supports OmniClass on all the family objects and the family types and the components. So it's very easy to create those in the context of a family object. And you'll also see at the bottom on the properties panel here, we have the various COBie parameters that are required for the model that are not by default part of a Revit model. So again, just information that we can add into places that we can put data required for the model. I mentioned the add-in for updating the parameters. Again, things like created by, created on, if you have a specific value you want to put into that external system, or we can use the defaults. A lot of this is populated with defaults, but other information, how you want to describe the extended ID or the key from Revit, whether it's a Revit ID or a GUID. Again, you have that option to do when you're populating, and you see that it begins to populate out the information. So those 5 fields that I showed earlier are populated directly by that utility. Once that's all done, then what we can do is very simply open up those schedules that we created. You'll see that they're populated with the information. We can export those schedules to a comma delimited file and paste those right into the COBie formatted spreadsheet. And the reason that we're doing it in that form is that we really want to be very intentional about how that data is placed into the COBie spreadsheet, because albeit true that the first time you do the export, it certainly could go right into the spreadsheet. As John mentioned, it's perfectly legitimate and part of the workflow to add or potentially update information in the spreadsheet while data may be updated within the model itself. And some of that data may not necessarily move back up into the model, so we want to be very careful that we're not overwriting data that someone may have managed or dealt with inside that spreadsheet. So at this point, what I'd like to do is, again, just to kind of go over what the support is. It's out of the box. We create a new model using the template. So when I say out of the box, there's nothing we have to do other than open that template and put that add-in or install the add-in to be able to do the work. We can add the COBie framework to an existing model. We could start a new model. There's automated generation of a lot of the data required for COBie. So there's a lot of information, and for anyone interested in working with the toolkit who may not have downloaded it, if you go to www.autodesk.com/buildingowner, what you'll see is a link to the COBie toolkit down here toward the bottom of the page. Simply click the Download Now button, and that will download the toolkit. There's an instruction manual there that will kind of walk you through the rest of that process. What I'd like to do right now is perhaps go through a quick demonstration of how that works. So let me just switch a couple of things, and we'll do here is jump into Revit. And what I'm going to do is very simply show you how we start a brand new project with the COBie template and what comes in. So the first thing I'm going to do is simply specify that I want to start a new project. We'll browse to our COBie template. So we have I have that placed right here. Some folks will put it right into their template library. I've chosen to put that in another library. We'll go ahead and open that and create that project. So the first thing you're going to see when this project opens is on the left side of the screen under Schedules. We now have a series of COBie schedules. So if I click the Space tab, you'll see, or the Space schedule. What you're going to see here is that we have a schedule that, if you look at the columns, is identical to what you saw in the COBie spreadsheet. So what I'm going to do real quickly right now is create a series of spaces. So let me open up that schedule and just move that up here, and let's go ahead and add a couple of rooms and a little bit of equipment. So again, I'm going to just do this very quickly. We'll put in 4 walls. Let's drop some walls in. And at this point, what I'm going to do is to simply come over to the Rooms tab selection, and we'll drop some rooms in. And notice that as I'm placing the rooms, you'll see that schedule beginning to populate with that information that we already know for those objects. In addition, we could come into our families, and I'm just going to drop a couple of objects in. So let's go ahead and insert a couple of, let's add a couple of components. And so the first thing that I'll do is let's put a, well, let's start by putting a couple of doors. I'm sorry, we'll put a furnace in the one room. We'll put, and let's put 2 desks. Again, just to put a little bit of information, different values. The other thing I'm going to do is drop a couple of doors in here. And let's change the size of those doors, and we'll go ahead and place those. So at this point, I've basically created a very simple, albeit populated model with information. So the first thing that we want to do in this, and again, this is going to apply to every model that we do, whether it's simple model or more detailed. So we have to determine what elements is it that we want to schedule. So for example, we might not want to go through and populate all the equipment from the various projects. So I'm going to simply say that I want to schedule the doors and mechanical equipment, and we'll just take one of the doors. And so again, when I come up here and now look at the type schedule, you'll see that I have the type information, and we can further come in and look at the component information and see that that's been populated as well. Now, remind you, as we're looking at this, we'll also see that the various schedule information created on created by is not there. So what we'll do is let's just kind of move this over to the side here, and let's grab our COBie add-in. And what we're going to do now is we're going to now populate that information that hasn't been transferred over. So we're going to put in the created by date, and I'm just going to say rich at autodesk.com, and the created by date, we can fill in any of these parameters. I'm just going to go ahead and pick them all. We'll use the GUID, and let's update those attributes. And you can see that that information's now been populated within that model. So those things that I have to add, for example, the category, remember I mentioned that we had a schedule key for that, so I could simply come in and begin to populate those here, or I could export it and populate it within the COBie model. At this point, all I have to do is to then export these schedules in the tool, put them into a space, and we're able to then paste them into the COBie spreadsheet. Again, that's very clearly defined. I'm running a little short on time here. I want to show you a couple other projects and means by which some of this information has been transferred. So again, just a quick view of how we would create a project from scratch. We won't save that. I'll go in and open up a small project here that we have, which is a medical center project that I've already started. Mentioned that we can create this with a blank template. At that point, it's just, if we look at any of these objects, if I click on the room, you'll see there's no COBie information within the tab here. So what I'm going to do is open a project here, which I'm going to open the blank project that I mentioned is in the model. So this, I'm sorry, I don't have that one. So I'm going to go ahead. What I would do then is I would open that project. I would place and copy those schedules in. I'm getting the 3-minute warning here from my colleagues, so I don't want to do that quickly. But again, that information would then be populated into that model. The last part of that is that we can then use that to export into any of the other applications. So, for example, if I were to go into the DDS viewer, we can open, and I have a couple of models here, but we can go ahead and open the that model that we just were looking at here, and I'm going to open that in the context of this model, which has already been populated. So this is in the context of an IFC. So if we can export the data to the spreadsheet, we can also export the Revit model as an IFC file. I'm looking at that IFC file in the DDS viewer, and if I select the air handler, and we can move down here a little bit, we can see that we have all the COBie information that was generated as part of that process. So again, the ability to very quickly generate that information in whatever format we want to do. The other example that we have here is also the clinic model that was put out by for the COBie challenges, and the same thing applies. We simply exported that to an IFC, and in a moment here I'll just open that record here. We'll look at one of those. I've got a lot of things running on my machine here, so as you're seeing this screen flash around here, we've got quite a bit going on. And if I simply say, let's edit the properties, we can open that properties dialog box. And again, the COBie information has also been populated and as part of that. So directly from Revit to the IFC file, and we could populate that. So at this point, what I'd like to do is thank you all for your time here. Again, this was a lot of information from, at least from my perspective, in terms of trying to communicate this. If you have any questions, my email address and John's email address are on the screen there. Feel free to contact us, and we'll see if we can't answer a couple quick questions here.
Yeah, Rich, this is John. Thanks so much. Yeah, and I finally figured out my mute, but one of the questions, we got a couple of questions. One of the questions is the relationship between COBie and BIM. And the question is COBie a standard for BIM, or do they work together to produce, FM types of data products? And I think it's more of the latter. And I mean, I can start to answer this, Rich, or if you're ready, I mean, you can answer it too.
Sure. I can answer that. So COBie is an output from the building information models, as John mentioned in that previous slide, where we saw the design and construction models coming together to the owner's model. Typically, there's a subset of information that will be used to populate the O&M systems. COBie really is a definition of the attribution, not really the graphics. In other words, if you look at the COBie specification, it is the descriptive information about those, and it's going to be something that would be derived from the building information model.
Yeah. And I think we might, I want to mention this question, but this one I think becomes sort of deeply philosophical at some level, but the basic question seems to be, is 3D important for FM or for facilities management? And it goes to, COBie is attributes, and the BIM has so much graphical, 3D graphical information. And I think this is one where there's sort of, tension between these two sort of aspects of it, the geometry versus the attributes. That one slide that had the changing buckets of data, but is 3D important for facilities management is the question.
So in my experience, 3D is going to be a generational kind of evolution of data. So yeah, I think there's a huge value in 3D for facilities management and be able to do things like stack plans from a space perspective, or understanding the configuration of equipment. So rather than looking at something in a 2D floor plan, which frankly at my age I'm more comfortable with. My son is one of those guys that would absolutely prefer to look at this in 3D. So that question becomes one that it becomes generational, and I think a lot of people will begin to warm up to it as the tools become easier to navigate and the models become more maneuverable. I mean, this is just, it's like I say, it's a matter of time, I think, and everything will be 3D.
So Rich, I think maybe we have time for one more question, and these are great questions, and I think they deserve much longer answers, but this one is asking, is there a 4D or a 5D element to COBie? And I think this is bringing in aspects of what we would probably think of as far as Navisworks is concerned, in that when you might be installing different aspects of your construction. But there's also a temporal aspect to COBie, i.e. the design team fills out some stuff and then passes it to the construction folks who do it later, and then the operations folks. So, I mean, what might you say on this question?
Yeah, I mean, what my comment on that would be, a lot of that data may support that, but understand that COBie is really the handover output. So a lot of the data that would be used for the 4D and 5D may be included in COBie as we move forward, but COBie by itself is not necessarily the definition of what data would be used for that. In other words, think about the COBie handover. If you kind of look at that package, it's the package of information and the definition of what I'm handing to the owner at handover. The data provided in COBie may be a result of 4D and 5D. It may contain part of the process, but COBie in itself really doesn't define the 4D and 5D. It will utilize common data across those.
All right. Okay, I think that's probably what we have time for.
You know, I saw one question here, and there was a question about the example works with 2011. So what you saw on the screen where this 2011 is currently available for 2011 and 2012 in 32-bit and 64-bit, and 2013 will be available when 2013 releases.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Rich and John. We have come to the end of the hour, and I've received many requests from folks who would like a copy of the presentation. So I just wanted to remind everyone that we are going to be making the audio and the slides available on the FIATech website. Give us a couple of days to package and post, but you can find it at fiatech.org. And I want to also just remind everyone that the FIATech Annual Technology Conference is coming up April 2nd, 3rd, and 4th in Miami at Doral. We've got a packed program with over 100 speakers and many presentations on interoperability solutions for our industry. So I encourage you to check out our website and look at that information and register. And thanks again, John and Rich. And I hope everyone has a great day. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you.